Jim Douglas here, Director of Handicapping with the CGA, Carolinas Golf Association. Thanks for sitting in on this seminar. This is going to be the full education of the World Handicap System and the Rules of Handicapping, kind of the same one we did back in 2024 when we had the Rules of Handicapping changes. A few changes here and there, some trim downs. Just a little bit of housekeeping. Try to keep your self muted unless you're asking a question. I've been using this new Microsoft Teams, and the mutes control is a little bit trickier than what I used to deal with, but that's about it. This seminar was originally going to be the demo of the Phase 3 review tool. I changed it to this general education just because I wasn't sure if the review tool was going to be completed by then, or by this time, and give us enough time. But it turns out it came out in time that we could have done it, but yeah, the review tool, the new Phase 3 is out. I'm going to be I did a demo of that next week on the 29th, May 27th. I have one, and later in the year, June 25th, right prior to club assessments needing to be completed. But yeah, anyway, my name again, Jim Douglas. For those who don't know, I see a lot of familiar names on my chat list. You can certainly hit up the chat as well. When asking a question, or just unmute yourself and ask a question. But please leave yourself on mute, otherwise, just to limit the background noise. The members of our member services team, Kevin Harris is our senior director, runs our department. Again, I'm Jim Douglas, director of handicapping. Anna Catherine Herring and Annie Grace Herman are our two wonderful managers of member services. So reach out anytime with questions, as you know. All right, without any further ado, let's jump right into the World Handicap System and the Rules of Handicapping. And then we're kind of going to go through the rule book, Rules of Handicapping, kind of rule by rule. This, by the way, should take I'm going to try to knock it out in about an hour and a half, get it knocked out. Might take a little longer depending on questions. It will be, I am recording it in theory here with this new technology, and I'll put it up, and I'm sure people will want the slides, and I will should be able to share those as well. Yeah. Let me get this. There we go. All right, great. All right, so Rule 1 is purpose and authorization, obtaining a handicap index. Purpose of the World Handicap System is to enhance the enjoyment of the game of golf and to give as many golfers as possible the opportunity to obtain and maintain a handicap index and use that handicap index on any golf course around the world and compete or play a casual round with anyone else on a fair and equitable basis. Prior to the World Handicap System being introduced in 2020, it was the USGA Handicap System, but now there's a single World Handicap System. It's great. We can go play golf in Scotland. You can post your score now. You used to be able to not do that if they had a different slope system. So how do we achieve this purpose? We establish course and slope ratings for each set of tees. We convert the handicap index into a course handicap and playing handicap to create equity. We assess the impact of playing conditions at each course on a given day, PCC. We limit the maximum hole score for handicap purposes to a net double bogey. We ensure that each player's handicap index is calculated consistently at the end of each day, and conducting handicap reviews. And we'll dig into all of these as we go. Rule 1.3, Rule 1 kind of sets the framework of everything. There's 5 what we call stakeholders. There's us, the Regional Golf Association. We're the CGA, Carolinas Golf Association, National Association, the USGA. Then it filters down to the golf club and handicap committee, and then the player. And everybody has responsibilities. This is one of my responsibilities is education. A golf club, a handicap committee, such as you're all have responsibilities, education, handicap reviews, and so forth. Players have responsibilities, playing by the rules of golf, attempting to make the best possible score on each hole, and so forth. How do you get a handicap index? That's simple. You join a golf club. So in order to obtain a handicap index that can be administered in accordance with the rules of handicapping, a player must be a member of an authorized golf club that's affiliated with an authorized association. That can be a typical green grass club. That can be what we call a type 2 clubs. A Kiwanis club has formed a golf club that play golf together. We have our E-clubs. Those count as a golf club as well. Note that by returning a score for the purpose of obtaining or maintaining a handicap index, the player acknowledges that their use of their scoring record will be available for peer review purposes. That means that you'll be able to look up a golfer's scores. But though there is going to be an update on that this year, onto this part, essentially, golfers will be able to opt out of having their scoring record be visible to golfers outside of their own club. If you're within a club, you can view all your other members' scoring records. But if you're outside, but for golfers outside the club, it's up to that golfer whether they want to be able to show their scoring record and allow everybody to see it. Designating a home club. A player must designate one golf club as their home club to be responsible for maintaining their handicap index. When a player is a member of more than one golf club, the player must ensure that each golf club knows of all golf clubs of which they are members is their home club. So basically, golfers can be members of more than one club. They just have to determine which club is going to be their home club. And how might they determine that? It might be where they live. It might be where they play just a little bit more. If a golfer is a snowbird, they can change their home club. If they're up north in the summer, they can make that their home club. If they're down south in the winter, they can make their southern course their home club. The USGA prefers that any modification of a handicap index happens through the home club. Doesn't have to, but that's kind of their preference. All right, so that's enough of Rule 1. Let's get into scores acceptable for handicap purposes. The scores a player submits for handicap purposes are at the core of the calculation of their handicap index. Rule 2 covers the condition a score must satisfy it for to be acceptable for handicap purposes, which provides confidence that it will produce a reasonable evidence of a player's ability and ultimately a handicap index that's reflective of their demonstrated ability. So a score is acceptable for handicap purposes if the round's been played in an authorized format of play, stroke play, match play, anything like that, where golfers teeing off and finishing the hole on their own. Have to play in the company of at least one other person. You can't play by yourself and post a score. Note that you can play, if you're playing by yourself and have somebody else tagging along who's not playing, as long as they can attest to that score, that's acceptable. Have to play on a golf course with the current course and slope rating. Can't post a score if the course does not have that. During an active season, not an issue here in the Carolinas. We're a year-round season, but the northern states, northern associations have active seasons. They basically can't post during the wintertime. And of course, play by the rules of golf. What would make an unacceptable score? If you're getting a lesson out on the course, that's not going to be an acceptable score. If your number type and or type of clubs is restricted, 3 clubs and a putter, can't post that score. Again, your score cannot be verified by another person. When you don't play your own ball, scrambles, alternate shot, Texas scrambles, events like that, you're not going to be able to post your score. And then finally, not playing the required number of holes. And we'll talk about that specifically in a little bit. Going back to scores on courses where ratings are expired. Golf courses are required to be re-rated every 10 years just because courses change over time. If the course has not been re-rated in that time frame, typically we'll inactivate that course and you wouldn't be able to post a score to it. Courses without a valid course and slope rating may not be posted. Like I said, required every 10 years. When golfers are searching for a course and they see this message, click here to manually post a score, I highly discourage manual posting. If you can't find that course in the system, it's most likely that course does not have a current course and slope rating. Of note, when searching for a course, try to keep your terms like to the name, use the keywords. Don't use golf club or the, and a lot of clubs have the in front of them. Just kind of stick to the keywords, Pinehurst, just focus on that. Don't need to type in Pinehurst Country Club because it might be in there as Pinehurst Resort, something like that. Stick to that keywords Pinehurst, for example. Yeah, and we have a lot of courses here in the Carolinas, about 455 in North Carolina and about 345 in South Carolina. So there's about 800 active rated courses here in the Carolinas. We just mentioned it, minimum number of holes to be played for a score to be acceptable. For a 9-hole score to be acceptable, all 9 holes must be played over 9 holes with current course and slope rating. Have to play all 9, either typically all the front 9 or all your back 9. For an 18-hole score to be acceptable, you'll have to play at least 10 holes. So when 10 to 17 holes are played, the player must post their score hole by hole. We'll talk about 10 to 17 hole scores in a minute. And when 10 to 17 holes are played, 9 of those must be played over 9 holes with the current course and slope rating. So they must have at least covered the front 9 or the back 9. Typical issue if there's a shotgun event and they start on number, let's say 5, and they play 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, whatever, and they don't get to 18. If they play just that set of holes in the middle, score cannot be posted. For whatever reason, that's not allowed with the current rules of handicapping. Adjustment of hole scores. So this is Rule 3, very important rule in my book. So a score for handicap purposes should not be overly influenced by 1 or 2 bad hole scores that are not reflective of the player's demonstrated ability. In addition, incomplete scores and/or scores where a player did not hole out on every hole can provide reasonable evidence of the player's ability and be used for handicap purposes. So Rule 3 is going to cover these circumstances where scores may be acceptable and how these scores should be adjusted. So 3.1 is the maximum hole score rule, and it starts out for golfers that do not yet have a handicap index. Their maximum hole score for handicap purposes is a 10, nice generous 10. So for a player submitting their first scores, and we do especially encourage new golfers to post scores hole by hole. I encourage all golfers to post hole by hole, but definitely new golfers. So in this example here, John Smith's working on establishing a handicap, gets a 12 on number 6. That's going to get reduced down to a 10. That gross score of 63 gets reduced down to what we call reduced down to a 61 with what we call the adjusted gross score. But more often than not, we have golfers already have an established handicap index, and their maximum hole score is going to be net double bogey. And net double bogey is the player's maximum hole score for handicap purposes, and it's equal to par plus 2 strokes for the bogey, double bogey, and any strokes plus any strokes that the player receives on that hole. We don't want a crazy high score to impact that player's handicap too severely. It would not be a fair representation of that golfer's ability. All right, so a specific example here, John Smith has a course handicap of 16. So he's going to get 1 stroke on every hole except the 17th and 18th stroke indexed hole. We can see the little check marks here where he gets a shot. So in the 17th hole, he hits a couple balls in the water, 3 putts, whatever he does, he gets a 9. That's going to get reduced down to a 7. Par of the hole is 4, 2 strokes for the double bogey 2, plus he gets 1 shot. So that's going to give him a maximum hole score of 7 for that hole. And that score should get adjusted accordingly. And again, that 88 gets reduced down to that adjusted gross score of 86. And hole by hole posting, just been talking about it. I'm a big fan of posting hole by hole. Posting hole by hole scores is not a USGA requirement or a CGA requirement. For those who saw my April 1st newsletter, thank you for tagging along and getting it. Hope you got a little bit of a kick out of that. Try to have a little fun on our side here for once. But it's not a requirement, but I do encourage it. And I don't expect it to be a requirement in anywhere in the near future. But I highly encourage golfers to post hole by hole. And any help that your committees can do to encourage that's much appreciated from my side. But some benefits. It takes very little time. I post as I play. Maybe not every hole, every 2 or 3 holes, I'll punch in my score and just put the phone down and get back to it when I jump back in the cart. Or you can just grab your scorecard, bam, bam, 656, 555, and post your score. Some benefits, like I said, that maximum hole score rule that we just talked about, it's applied automatically. You don't have to think about it. The golfer can enter their actual score that they shot, which leads to a more accurate handicap index. It minimizes posting errors. Um, so, when a golfer has posted an incorrect score, they may not notice it till the next day. They've got to go into the shop or contact the handicap committee to get the score corrected. The GIN app keeps your hole by hole statistics. You get a percentage of pars, birdies, bogeys, stuff like that. That's kind of fun to look at, to be honest, or discouraging when I'm looking at my stats. At the club level, the club will have scores for use by the club. Maybe they want to reevaluate stroke indexes, or maybe they've found out holes playing really difficult and it's slowing up pace of play. Maybe we should move the tees up on this particular hole. And then, of course, when doing a handicap review, a handicap committee can see in a golfer's entire round and kind of get a little bit clearer picture of a golfer's score. All right, moving on with that was 3.1 with a tangent into hole by hole posting. So now we're getting into rule 3.2 when a hole is not played. A score from an incomplete round or one or more holes have not been played may only be used for handicap purposes if, again, we've played that minimum number of holes and then, covered that rated 9. So if you don't finish a round, as long as your reason for not finishing that round was valid, then you can post that score. So what's a valid reason for not finishing a round? Well, you're pretty obvious ones: darkness, bad weather, injury, you hurt your hand, you hit a rock or hit a root, illness, got sick out there for whatever reason, had to sit out some holes or couldn't finish the round. If there's holes out of play, maintenance, or if you're in a match and it finishes before the final hole. But some reasons for not reasons for not finishing a round that wouldn't be acceptable for posting your score. Weather that doesn't prevent the continuation of play, maybe a light mist or something like that. Avoiding a hole to avoid posting a high score. The big one here, not playing the final holes on a golf course in order to avoid submitting a high score if you're playing badly or a low score if you're playing well. That's really kind of the big one. Can't just quit because you're playing well and don't want to post that score. And any other situations the handicap committee could look at. But as long as that handicap says, or committee says that's okay for that score to be posted, an 18-hole score differential is going to be created using what we call expected score for those holes that were not played. So how does this all work? And you don't need the specifics behind the scenes, but the idea is that when 10 to 17 holes are played, a value is calculated from the holes played. Then the expected score is used for any holes not played, and those are combined for that 18-hole score differential. Again, we're required to post hole by hole so that the appropriate score differential can be calculated from the holes played. Basically, the system needs to know what holes were played, what holes were not played. So the system's going to system's going to kind of estimate a rating and slope for those holes that were played and then combine it with that expected score. And we talk more about expected score. It's basically a kind of a neutral average score based on your handicap index. And it just actually is defined here, isn't it? Expected score. The score a player is expected to achieve over a specified number of holes on a course of standard difficulty. It's calculated using the player's handicap index and attributes a numerical value against any holes or holes not played. And it's not going to be a specific number like a 4 or a 5. It might be like if you've not played 2 holes, it might be like 8.2 or something like that, or 8.5. It all depends. It's all behind the scenes. And like a little side note, there are some limited circumstances where we can use the old method of using net par, par plus any handicap strokes you receive for holes not played. Typically, that's for maintenance. If the handicap committee chooses it, if there's 1 or maybe at most 2 holes out of play, we can use net par. Typically, you can ask me and consult with me on the best way to go. I really like this solution for 10 to 17 holes scores. It's pretty simple. You just post the scores that you played, leaves the ones you didn't play blank. System figures it out for you. I think it's a much better solution than net par, where you're having to determine if you get a stroke what the par is, and so on and so forth. So this idea is great. But the example we have, this golfer played 16 holes, and so we're going to split the round into the holes played and the holes not played. We've got our rating and slope information up here. And so the system's, again, going to kind of guesstimate a rating for those holes that don't have an official rating, the 7 holes in the back 9, and guesstimate a 16-hole rating, kind of determine a slope for those 16 holes, and then come up with a score differential for those 16 holes. So in this example, a little sneak preview of the calculation of a handicap index, the adjusted gross score, subtract the course rating, multiply by 113, that standard slope, and divide by the slope to get that 16-hole score differential of 12.7. And then we're going to add that to an expected score differential. Like I said, it's not an even number, or it could be, but typically it's going to be a number like this, 2.12. So Jane Smith's handicap index of 16 is used to determine her expected score differential over 2 holes, and that value is added to that 16-hole differential the system calculated to get a final 18-hole score differential of 14.8. These scores are easy to indicate on your app, on the website. When 10 to 17 holes are played, the scoring record is going to display. Oops, I'm sorry. A little graphic issue there. It's going to display the number of holes played in parentheses next to the. It's going to show the actual adjusted score. It's going to show those numbers of strokes that you had through, for example, 16 holes. And it's going to show the number of holes played in parentheses next to that adjusted gross score. That helps with any potential confusion from seeing a score that, it's going to be, I didn't shoot, I didn't shoot a 70, but you had 70 after 16 holes, while the rest of your scores are 85 and 86 and whatever. And it's going to show the full 18-hole course rating, slope rating, and score differential. So we can see that an example of that here. Here's they had 71 shots through 16 holes, and the score differential is calculated here. And then the last rule is 3.3 of Rule 3 is Rule 3.3, hole not completed. So there's various circumstances that might result in a player starting a hole but not holing out. That golfer didn't pick the ball up out of the hole. The result of the hole has already been decided. There's no reason for you to continue. If a hole has been conceded in match play, I've lost. I can't beat my opponent. There's very little chance I'm going to beat my opponent. That putt's good. Let's pick up and move on to the next hole. Or you're in a 4-ball match play or 4-ball stroke play, and your partner's already in with a better score. You're done. You can pick up that ball. But that score, or that your hole still has enough strokes in it for handicap purposes. We're not going to treat it as an unplayed hole that we just talked about. We're going to treat it as a hole not completed. So when a hole is started and not completed, this score recorded for handicap purposes is the most likely score. And that's exactly what it means. Most likely score, the number of strokes already taken, plus the number of strokes you would most likely require to complete the hole. And the rule book now has specific guidelines on what to use for maximum hole score. If you're on the putting green, no more than 5 feet from the hole, you're just going to add 1 stroke to your score. Simple as that. 5 feet or less, just add 1. If you're outside of 5 feet, within, say, 20 yards, add 2, but maybe 3 strokes, depending on the position of the ball and the difficulty of the green and the player. So I always like to say, if your ball is just off the green and you got a straightforward chip, just add 2 to your score. If you're in a tricky bunker and you've got a tiered green and you're not that great out of the sand, probably want to add 3 to your score. And then the less common situation is if you're in the fairway more than 20 yards out. I guess perhaps maybe your partner's holed out from the fairway or something miraculous like that. But you would add either 3 or 4 additional strokes, again, depending on that position of the ball, difficulty of the green, ability of the player. And of course, we're not going over maximum hole score with most likely score. For those that use tournament software, are familiar with tournament software, or even paper scorecards, there's a way to handle this on those apps, on those scoring calculations. Here's two examples. This is a screenshot from the commonly used Golf Genius software. You would enter your score in with an X and then a 5, where the X means you picked up your ball, your score didn't count for the match. So say this is a 4-ball match play, but you most likely would have scored a 5. So the Golf Genius software, and I think other software packages do it, it's going to treat that X as an X for the match. But when it goes to post back the score, it's going to use the value after the X, like 6 in this case, 5 in this case. If you just use an X, at least the Golf Genius software is going to post back a maximum hole score. So you're going to get probably get an inflated score if you have too many X's. But you could use an X if you certainly hit 2 out of bounds on the tee and are completely out of it. Then you're probably definitely going to be an X, for example. All right, great. Moving right along, submitting a score. So now we're into Rule 4, which is pretty short rule. It really covers just covers the process for submission of acceptable scores for handicap purposes, both for maintaining starting a handicap index and maintaining a handicap index. Timely submission of scores by a player or anyone else authorized to submit scores on their behalf allows for responsive updates and provides a real-time measure of that golfer's ability. This rule is also going to outline the information players are required to submit for scores, which is pretty straightforward and easy these days. So kind of a technicality rule here, but still should be covered. Information required for posting a score. Scores must be acceptable. We just talked about that. It is important to record scores in correct chronological order, even if the score was posted on a day later than the date the round was played. So if you happen to have to post your score the next day or 2 days later, make sure to enter that proper date. Definitely want to post scores in chronological order. Doing scores out of chronological order is a big red flag if I'm ever looking at things. I'm sorry, Ed. I hope I'm not cutting out here. I'll try to make sure my microphone's okay. Upon posting a score, a player must ensure the following information is provided for inclusion in their scoring record. Include the date of the round played and the course's slope rating. Not an issue. We're all using the GIN app or the GIN software or another software, and you can't not post a score without that information. Who can post a score? Well, a score can be posted into a player's scoring record. Must be posted by the player, of course. The handicap committee can post a score for a golfer. The committee in charge of a competition, of an event, can post a score. And finally, anyone else authorized by the player. A little trickier to do these days, but if there's a score posting kiosk at your club and somebody's got to go, hey, Joe, can you post my score for me? I've got to run. Time frame for posting. A player should submit their score as soon as possible on the day of play after completion of their round and before midnight local time. And this is a strong should. Scores really need to be posted on the day of play. If a player does not post a score on the day of play, their handicap index won't be updated in time for the next day. And their score is not going to be included in the daily playing conditions calculation that we'll talk about here in the next rule. So if you're not posting your score on the day of play, you may have a very slight influence on other people's handicap indexes. But yeah, post your score on the day of play. Of note, if you make a mistake posting your score, this is kind of outside the rule book, but a score can be deleted by the user up until midnight of the same day and then reposted via gin.com or the GIN mobile app. There's not a way to edit a posted score, but you can delete that score and repost it. The exception being if the score was posted by the committee or posted by a tournament committee, golfers wouldn't be able to edit those scores, but the scores they post on their own, they can delete and then repost properly. And of course, if an error is noticed the next day, the golfers need to contact your home club's handicap committee or often the club staff to request a score correction, which ensures peer review. And there's it's a little small print to find, but you can find it there on the app. Certification of a score, that's really peer reviews. This is a little more for the R&A folks, I think. But a score posted for handicap purposes must be made available for peer review as soon as possible after the completion of the round. So to facilitate peer review, a player or someone authorized by the player must post their score as soon as possible. The handicap committee should ensure a submitted score to a player's scoring record is posted as soon as possible. That line's for any handicap committee that happens to be posting scores for whatever reason. Make sure to try to get that done as soon as possible. Peer review is normally conducted by someone playing in the same group or who is present during the round or who's a member of the same golf club. Margaret has a question. For peer review, do players need to save their cards any longer? Saving scorecards, turning scorecards in is not a requirement within the rules of handicapping. But a handicap committee can require scorecards to be submitted for a period of time. Let's say for 2 weeks, you have to turn in your scorecards. Not all the time, but maybe at various intervals, or maybe a weekend, turn in your scorecards. Just kind of doing peer review to making sure that golfers have posted their scores. Hard to do every day, but randomly doing it. This weekend we're going to compare tee sheets to scores posted, that kind of thing. So you can do it every once in a while, but it's not required all the time. An exception being we talk about modifying a golfer's handicap index later. If you've modified a golfer's handicap index, maybe they've not been posting their scores very accurately, you can require a specific golfer to return their cards after each round for a period of time as well. Good question. Thank you. What can happen if a question from Bill? What can happen if a player posts a score lower than shot and was notified by the other players in the group? I think we talk about that as well. That's kind of falls in line with not posting the scores at all. Essentially, and again, we'll talk about it. The handicap committee has the ability to post the proper score in lieu of the score that he had posted, and or post a penalty score to that golfer. It's important to make sure you know the golfer's intention. Was it an act? Make sure it wasn't an accident, of course. But if it becomes problematic behavior, there's further steps can be taken. Posting an incorrect score and failure to post, kind of a similar thing, but it kind of depends. But we'll talk about that here in a little bit.
Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to further expand on that. We got
Sure.
a person that does that. They're trying to make it to one of our tournaments, so they're actually trying to get their handicap down. So they tend to do that this time of year. We've noticed a pattern with this particular golfer. So that's something that I was wanting to, and we can discuss it further later if you want, but I got some ideas on how to possibly handle that. But
yeah, I'm sorry, who is this? Just make a note.
This is Bill Boyer, and
okay.
I'm at Savannah Lakes Village.
I got you. SLV. Okay. Yeah. That's a little bit of a trickier one. They're usually not hurting anybody but themselves, but they don't want to be in an event that they shouldn't be in, or if it's a team event. I've had a few. We always the term for this is vanity handicap. Nobody wants to play with that golfer because they'll have no chance to win. But ultimately, the job of a handicap committee is to make sure that handicap index is an accurate representation of their ability, and that's your job. So that's a challenge we have to work at. So yeah, let me. If we don't cover it in this presentation, I'll circle back with you for sure, Bill.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
Yeah, in fact, I had an interesting one just this week. We had a golfer that joined one of our e-clubs, posted a bunch of low scores to get his handicap index low enough to be able to compete in a U.S. Open local qualifier, and he shot a 114. So he's going to get a letter from me this week about that. So kind of an extreme. I don't think it's quite Bill's issue is quite as extreme, but he clearly did falsified his scoring record, so he's going to have to be. I'm going to have to deal with him. Anyway, moving on. Great question, Bill. Like I said, if we don't cover it, we'll follow up with you. Probably follow up with you anyway later. Thank you all for waiting. Where are we? Rule 4.5, initial handicap index. And this is the last one here. To obtain an initial handicap index, a player has to play at least 54 holes. It can be any combination of 6 9-hole rounds or 3 18-hole rounds, or any combination in there. There's no time limit on posting these scores, as they may be backdated. So often a golfer has a record of their past scores on a spreadsheet or something, and they finally establishing an index. It's certainly acceptable to post their old scores at that time to get going. And like I said, it's strongly recommended that initial scores are submitted hole by hole, so that you can better assess the player's ability if needed. All right, Rule 5, the kind of the meat of the handicap index and the rules of handicapping here. So as I just mentioned, the player's handicap index should represent their demonstrated ability. That's our goal. And where appropriate, be responsive to scores that are inconsistent with that ability. So Rule 5 is covering the process of calculating a handicap index and talking about some of the safeguards that we have to ensure that a player's handicap index remains reflective of their ability and that equity remains for all our golfers. What is a handicap index? A handicap index provides you with a portable measurement of your playing ability consistent with how golfers are measured worldwide. We can use it to track our progress and play a casual or competitive round with other players. And we certainly encourage all players to establish and maintain a handicap index. Kind of touched on it a minute ago. So score differential, that's kind of where we really work with things here. Score differential. We touched on it briefly. So after an 18-hole score is posted, it is converted to a score differential, which accounts for the course difficulty of the course and tees played. The higher that course slope rating, the longer that course is typically going to be, the more difficult that course is going to be. So our score differential is our adjusted gross score, adjusted with, that means maximum hole score has been applied. Subtract the course rating, subtract any PCC adjustment, the playing conditions calculating adjustment. Take that value, multiply that by our standard slope of 113, and then divide by the slope rating. And that's going to get us our score differential. PCC, we talk about that later. It ranges from -1.0, which means it was easy, up to 3.0, up to +3, which means that course played more difficult. And in a specific example here, we can see our score differential is our score minus this course rating, subtract any PCC, multiply by the 113, divide by the slope. 85 score with a 68.7, 117 gives us a score differential of 15.7. You don't need to know that, but it's kind of nice to know. When a player posts a 9-hole score, we're going to calculate a 9-hole score differential for the scores for the 9 holes that were played. And similar to how we handle 10 to 17 holes, we're going to combine that with an expected score based on that player's handicap index for that 18-hole score differential. So again, we talked about expected score. It's the neutral kind of average score that's expected for a golfer of a particular handicap index to shoot. So let's look at a specific example here. Mr. Smith has a handicap index of 10, and they shoot a 42 on a rating and slope of 36.0, 125. System's going to calculate the 9-hole score differential, score minus the rating. It would use half of any PCC adjustment just because you played 9 holes. Multiply by 113, divide by 125. In this case, is going to give that golfer a score differential of 5.42 for those 9. But then that 5.42 is going to get combined with that golfer's expected score of, in this case, 6.38. So that's the score differential based on a handicap index of 10. You can't, knowing beforehand, you don't know what that expected score is, knowing beforehand. There's not a chart or a calculation to do that. Though if you're really curious, you can retroactively figure it out if you're really curious what your expected score was. And so those values get added together, gives that golfer a full 18-hole score differential there of 11.8. And USJ's got a graphic here that kind of shows when a 9-hole score differential is posted, the 9-hole score differential is combined with the expected score, and it shows you two different examples of the golfer. Here's a golfer with 2 different 9-hole scores, but the same expected scores is applied, and how you get a different 18-hole score differential based on based on the 9 holes that were played. And then in the app, when 9 holes are played, the scoring record is going to show that adjusted gross score, the 9-hole rating and slope, 9-hole differential, and a score type of N. Use of an expected score begins once they have a handicap index. Doesn't happen before you get your handicap index established. All right, calculation of handicap index. So if golfer has fewer than 20 scores, so the handicap index is calculated from the lowest score differentials in the scoring record. We're not using all the score differentials. We're just going to use a percentage. If a golfer has less than 20 scores, we use this table, which you'd think I'd have memorized by now, but I certainly don't. I guesstimate at it a lot, but I got that printed up on my bulletin board. But anyway, so if, for example, golfer has 15 scores or 16 scores, the system is going to calculate the handicap index based on the average of the lowest 5 score differentials. But we can refer to that chart in Rule 5.2. But most golfers at this point have 20 scores. So if a scoring record has at least 20 scores, the procedure for calculating a handicap index is we're going to average the lowest 8 of those most recent 20 score differentials and round off to the nearest 10th. But then we're also going to compute the difference between the average of that lowest 8 score differentials and the golfer's low handicap index to determine if a cap is applied. That's one of our safeguards, one of our guardrails. Specific example here of the handicap index calculation. And then we can see the scores being used in the handicap index calculation indicated by stars. You can see that as well on your own GIN app. They've got the blue stars next to them. Average those low 8 score differentials, divide by 8, and we get add them up, average them out. This example gives us a 9.9. And this is the way it is for most golfers. About 90% of golfers, this is how we're going to get their calculation determined. Maximum handicap index, by the way, is a 54.0. Though note for competitions, a committee in charge of a competition can set a maximum limit for entry and limit the playing handicap for the competition. Under the rules of handicapping, a handicap index updates the day after a score is posted. Players are expected to post a score on the same day. Again, that's we talked about this. It ensures the player's handicap index is updated the next day. Playing conditions calculation, and importantly, that score gets out there for peer review. A note kind of for committees in charge of a competition, if you're conducting a multi-round competition over consecutive days, like a member guest, member, it is recommended that the handicap index be used at the start of the competition is used for all rounds. Not required, but it's recommended. Kind of keeps things simple. Those scores should still be posted on the day of play, whether that's the responsibility of the committee in charge of the competition or the player. And also note, committees in charge of a competition, certainly, even though we don't recommend changing that handicap index, if they feel an adjustment to the playing handicap index, or I'm sorry, if an adjustment to the playing handicap is warranted before or between rounds of a competition, that is certainly up to the discretion of a committee in charge of a competition. This slide talks about aging of scores. A score continues to be a part of the handicap index as long as it's within that player's most recent 20 scores. There's no time limit, regardless of the age of the score. I certainly have some old scores on my 20 scores. This chart graphic just shows the new score gets posted and the score is just fallen off that last 20 list. All right, enough of that. Moving on to the playing conditions calculation, which I'm sure you're probably all familiar with. PCC, it's a statistical procedure that compares the scores of the players on the day of players on the day against the expected scoring based on the number and competition of the players submitting scores. So we talked about that expected score. This is another use of expected score. The system's going to look at, and it's like I said, it's simply a statistical procedure. It doesn't look at anything else. Looks at the scores posted on the day of play. If significantly fewer players than anticipated attain expected score, the system's going to say, hey, conditions were harder than normal. We'll look like we'll apply a PCC adjustment. If significantly more players than anticipated attain their expected score, conditions are determined to be easier than normal. And the adjustment, which ranges from -1, easy, to +3, difficult, is based on the amount needed to move enough players into expected scoring range. So let's look at how the calculation works with when a PCC is in place. So again, here's our formula for calculating a score differential, and here's our example. Golfer shoots 94, course rating 69.4, slope 132. Run that through our equation, and we get a score differential of 21.1. But let's say PCC is applied of +2, the course played more difficult. That's going to get plugged into this step here. We're going to subtract that PCC. And that 21.1 that you may have seen when you first posted your score, when you look at it the next day, it's going to go down to a 19.3 in this case. So our key considerations for PCC. It takes place once at midnight at local time on each day. It's not recalculated again the next day if more scores are posted. It's only done during that overnight computation. It doesn't look at players with a handicap index of greater than 36. The system needs at least 8 scores to be posted on a given day, and the more scores that are posted, the better the data is. So I've had a few inquiries where the weather was really bad, but it was just 4 or 6 people only posted the scores, so there weren't enough to get PCC implemented. There's lots of reasons PCC could be applied. If the adjustment, or if the course was set up a little easier or a little harder than normal, that might trigger PCC. Maybe the greens were a little slower than normal. It was windier than usual. Right now, we're in our drought here in the Carolinas. Maybe we haven't been able to mow the grass, and so the ball is running out of the fairway, or the rough's thicker. Many reasons here. Any manual entries of scores wouldn't be counted. And then scores, again, must be posted on the day of play to be included in the PCC. If there's PCC determined on a specific, determined for a day, and then the next day that golfer posts a score, and it's not going to get, like I said, PCC is not going to get recalculated, but the PCC that was calculated will be applied to his score. All right, so that was PCC. Now we're kind of jumping back to the calculation of the handicap index. And so we're going to be looking at what we call the low handicap index, which you see right on your GIN app. The low handicap index represents the demonstrated ability of a player over the 365-day period preceding the day on which the most recent score in their scoring record was played. It's a reference point against which the current handicap index can be compared. The idea is that the handicap system's now looking at just looking at scores beyond the most recent 20, looking at that golfer's ability and play over a year time frame. You don't get a low handicap index until you have 20 acceptable scores in your scoring record. They can be 18, they can be 9. Once player has a low HI, it's going to be, like I said, it's reevaluated every time a new acceptable score is submitted. I get a question on that every once in a while. It's not, you technically could have a low HI that's a bit older than a year old, because it's based on it's a year from the most recent score. So it's only reevaluated when you post a score. Some reminder for handicap committees: where a handicap committee applied adjustment reduces the player's handicap index, the adjusted handicap index resets the low handicap index to the adjusted handicap index. I had a recent case like that. A golfer at a club, they implemented a reduction to his handicap last fall, which lowered his low handicap index, and he wasn't 100% pleased about that because his low handicap index is being used for some competitions, but that's the way that works often. But where a handicap committee applied adjustment increases a player's handicap index, the committee should consider resetting that player's low handicap index to the same value and work that up. So if you're raising a handicap index, you probably want to raise that low handicap index as well to kind of keep things even. I'll talk a little more about handicap reviews in a little while. Why does it 365 days? Why is it the specific number of scores, what have you? But 365, that's enough time to consider the memory of player's demonstrated ability. USGA is working with the concept that a player's ability doesn't change that much over a year. Yes, there's certainly exceptions to that, age, injury, what have you. But generally, a player's ability doesn't change a lot over a year. It's a consistent time frame for everyone, 365 days. If it was a count of scores, it would vary for everyone. And then finally, if a player did real well in an annual event, and then that may impact their handicap index, it still could be influencing their handicap index a year later. All right, so low handicap index is going to lead us to that guardrail. One of our first guardrails, the soft and hard cap. So the caps, they're part of the handicap index calculation. They're not something that the CGA looks at and applies. It's just simply a part of that handicap index calculation. It ensures that a temporary loss of form doesn't cause a player's handicap index to increase with a level inconsistent with their ability. So if a 3.0 increase takes place, that soft cap is going to slow it by 50%. And then finally, if a 5.0 stroking takes place, after the soft cap, that is, the hard cap is going to prevent any additional upward movement. And of course, the handicap committee at the Players Club can override a cap if circumstances such as injury exists. Looking at an example will kind of make this a little clearer, I hope. So here, golfer has low handicap index here of 20.0. That's their lowest handicap index over the past year. And their handicap index is sneaking up. And then finally, that best 8 of 20 average becomes a 23, which is going to start triggering the soft cap. And then as they post scores, this is where that soft cap zone where it's going to slow the raise of that handicap in here. And then finally, it'll be capped off at 25.0, and their handicap index won't be able to go above that. Common question is, when do I get off the cap? Well, it depends. Their golfer scores might get better and they could get off the cap. But also that low handicap index is often going to, like in this example, is going to sneak upwards. And as it sneaks upwards and the time goes, like it was established in June and we're here in May. So that low handicap index is going to go up, and maybe that will get them off the cap, or the combination of lower scores and the higher low handicap index. And so some messages, again, it's part of the handicap index and is applied automatically. The purpose of the caps is to provide equity and ensure a player's chance of playing to their handicap is consistent with others. Without the caps, players who experience a significant upward movement in a short period of time on average do have a more likely chance of scoring at or below their handicap index compared to a more stable player. Hey, I had a golfer who was like, my handicap's being held down by that hot streak I had last fall. Well, that hot streak that you had last fall is a measure of your ability. You've shown you could play that well. That's the purpose of the cap. That person could quickly figure out, my alignment was off. I got straightened out and I'm going to get back to normal pretty quickly here. And then most players who experience a cap will return to their normal demonstrated ability. In many cases, the impact of a soft cap is only a couple of tenths of a stroke and may not change their course handicap. I've looked at a lot of data here, and yeah, I'll see, it's 10, 12% of golfers are on a cap at any one time. It's not uncommon. Not many are on a hard cap. That's a little rare. But lots of golfers are on a soft cap, but usually it's only just a tenth or two of strokes. And I will remind you, a lot of golfers, whenever they see a change to their handicap index or something happening to the handicaps, they call it a penalty. It's not a penalty. It's part of the calculation. It's using your ability, your scores over a year period to come up with an accurate number. Exceptional score reduction. The exceptional score reduction identifies exceptional scores which may indicate the player's true ability. So here's our table for exceptional scores. So if a golfer shoots a score that's basically if it's better than 7.0, better than their handicap index, the system's going to apply an exceptional score reduction of -1. If they happen to shoot an exceptional score that's 10 more than their handicap index, current handicap index, it's going to be a reduction of -2. You do have a report as a club administrator in the admin portal to view exceptional scores. And I do encourage you to run it from time to time and look at those. Sometimes I've seen golfers that pop on there twice. Hey, what's going on here? Certainly any -2 reductions I look at often they can be errors. The golfers played in the scramble and they accidentally posted their score, something like that. Anyway, how does this reduction work? Well, that -1, say, let's look at an example here. So we have a golfer's scoring record. Their handicap index is 10, and they shoot a low 75 score differential of 2.9, which is 7.1 below the 10. And that's going to trigger an ESR. So that 2.9 is an ESR, exceptional score reduction score. And so that score is going to get posted, and each of the last 20 scores in that golfer's scoring record are going to be reduced by each of that golfer's last 20 score differentials are going to be lowered by 1. That effectively reduces that golfer's handicap index by 1. And then as golfers post scores, that -1 adjustment to each of the score differentials falls off. All right, that is everything with the calculation of a handicap index. All right, take a breath. All right, course handicap and playing handicap calculation. So course handicap calculation, the course handicap converts the handicap index to the number of strokes needed to play to the par of the tees being played. So that's a portability of the player's handicap index wherever you play. Course handicap can be used for net double bogey adjustments where appropriate. Again, don't need to know the calculation, but here's how the calculation works. We take our handicap index, multiply by the slope rating, and then divide by that standard slope of 113. We're going to add the course rating and then subtract the par. And that's going to get us, as this example shows, our course handicap. The number of strokes you need to play to the par of the tees being played. And you can call that target score. Target score is the score needed to play to your handicap. 3 examples of a golfer with a 15.0 handicap index. Here's their course handicap from each of these tees. You can see as the tee gets a higher course and slope rating, the course handicap is going to go up and the target score is going to go up. Question, just going to jump back. Did you say how long ESR remains? The reduction is applied to each of those last 20 score differentials. So how long it remains depends on how often that golfer plays golf. As they post scores, that reduction is going to kind of gradually go away. So there's not a specific time on that. Nancy asked while we're here, what does the system do with home, away, and competition? Oh, good question. I need to probably add a better slide on that. They're just indicators really for your use. There's no weight or anything like that applied to home or away or competition scores. But it's nice to know when looking at a golfer scoring record, what records are, or what scores are home scores, what scores are away scores. You know, if a golfer has a lot of away scores, you know, that's something that you might be able to look at. And then competition scores, those are very important to look at. Competition scores can often be a better indicator of a golfer's ability, and I'll actually talk about this in a little bit. So often when doing a scoring review, I'll look at, I'll compare the average of the competition score differentials to the average of the casual score differentials. If those casual score differentials are much higher than competition score differentials, we might want to look at the competition score differentials a little closer and maybe determine a better handicap index or even playing handicap for that golfer. There used to be, Margaret, there used to be part of the handicap index calculation from years ago that looked at tournament scores and gave them a year to be included in the part of the calculation. But the C for competition, that'll stay on that golfer's score for forever. There's no change in that. You didn't have to use years ago. For those that don't know, I used to work for a handicapping company called GolfNet that you may remember. We were the gin and golf genius of our time. So I've been worked for them for 28 years. No, more than that. 32. I don't know. So I've been in handicapping my whole life. I've ended up doing this. So this is a nice end up for me here, director of handicapping here. Anyway, so yeah, there used to be a part of the calculation that took the 2 best tournament scores and made an adjustment from there, but that's no longer in there. But again, we do want to look at what competition scores a golfer has. All right, thank you. For the sidebar, where are we at? Target score. So yeah, harder the course and slope rating is, the higher that course handicap is going to be, the higher that golfer's target score is going to be. Course handicap leads us into playing handicap. So our playing handicap calculation determines the number of strokes each player gives or receives, enabling equity for all players within the different formats of the game. So if where formats of play are 100%, then the playing handicap is the same as the course handicap. But often the playing handicap is going to be a little bit lower than the course handicap. You're going to use a handicap allowance. That's going to be applied to the unrounded course handicap during the calculation to get us to the playing handicap. So for example, 4-ball stroke play, they may be using 85% of the course handicap. A player might have a course handicap of 15, but a playing handicap of 13. I like to say course handicap is you against the course. The playing handicap is you against the field, the other players in the competition. This slide just talks about, it used to be the handicap allowance was applied to the full course handicap. Now the handicap allowance is applied to the unrounded course handicap to get a better value of that playing handicap index, or I keep saying it, better value for that playing handicap. But we do use the rounded full course handicap for any maximum hole score changes. We don't use the playing handicap for maximum hole score. We use the full course handicap. If you are in a competition where there's a difference in where players are playing different tees and there's a difference of pars, there is an adjustment for that to account for that because par is included in the calculation of that course handicap, which leads to the calculation of the playing handicap. So when a competition is played from 2 or more sets of tees, there's no additional adjustment required for differences in course and slope rating like there used to be. Depending on the format of play and any difference in par between tees, there may be an adjustment for the difference in pars of the playing handicap. Stroke play and match play formats are examples. Stableford's, I think, the one example where you don't adjust for pars. But typically tournament software is handling all that for us. And again, of course, handicaps used for general play, your target score, net double bogey, and playing handicap for the purposes of the game. And as I said, course handicap you against the course, playing handicap you against other players. The GIN has the GIN app has the handicap calculator app, which we can see the handicap index, the course handicap index for the tees I've chosen, the playing handicap and then the strokes off the low ball column here as well. All right, good spot for any questions. That's actually all for the rules of the specific rules, and then we're going to get into, no, I guess not. We get committee actions next.
Jim, I had a question on the handicap calculations for plus handicappers.
Okay.
It's when you're in a tournament situation and you're applying your 85%. The way I'm reading or what we've been doing is using a multiplication of the handicap, say from a +2, that where a plus handicapper actually gets an advantage because you're using the 85%, and so he might end up with a 1 handicap instead of a 2, a +2.
Yep.
And that seems backwards. And I understand the logic of the calculation, trying to keep the differentials the same between the normal handicap person and a plus handicap, but it seems backwards that you're given an advantage when you're applying an at 85%.
Sure.
So I was wondering if you could
Yeah.
comment on that.
Common question. I think I have a slide on that later, actually. The idea of a
You can wait till then.
No, that's all right. We're here. The idea of the and the slide probably would work better back here anyway. The idea of a handicap allowance is to shrink the field, to make the range of playing handicaps smaller than before, and the purposes of that is for equity of the competition, to essentially give each team or player a chance at winning or getting in the a top few places. So the idea is to shrink the field. It's not necessarily to give players an advantage or a disadvantage. If you think about it, like if you had you had a 0 going up against a 10, and you're doing a percentage of handicap, you want that smaller, like 0 to 8. But if you have a -5 and or a +5 and a 5, and you're applying a percent of handicap, a handicap allowance, that would just kind of move, doesn't shrink the gap. It moves it kind of the same way, and it keeps that same value. So that's the idea. It shrinks the field, shrinks the range, gives everybody a chance a chance at winning. You have to kind of think about it as an adjustment to the field, not to each individual players. Ultimately, it's up to your tournament, the committee in charge of the competition, to do what they think is correct. But that's the idea: is to shrink the field. You have to think of it in terms of the field rather than a specific player, and that's it's confusing to a lot of people.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, but I got a comment on that. It seems like with a plus handicap, since you're multiplying for, we'll call it really a negative, because you're kind of your target score is going to be higher. For them, their target score is lower. It seems like you divide by 0.85 instead of doing a multiplication.
It seems like it, but we don't. It's in the rules of handicapping. It talks about it's all applied the same way, essentially, because what's ended up as being a 0, a scratch golfer, just that's kind of where that value's landed. It's almost kind of an arbitrary. Here's what we've ended up with based on all these formulas. Here's what a scratch golfer is. But again, our idea is to shrink that range and make the event equal for everybody. And it seems, like I said, you have to think about it in terms of the field rather than specific players. Nancy asked, does the PCC calculation vary between tees and between men and women, or is it all just all tees? Oh, good question. I didn't mention that. The PCC calculation is going to look at all scores posted on that day and kind of lump everybody together: men, women, all the different tees that are played. It's not a separate one for men, separate one for ladies. It's going to kind of all work the same way.
Jim.
Great question. Yes, sir.
Dick Miller from New Bern. Recently, we had a tournament where it was a 4-man format. We had low gross, 2 net, but we played from 3 different tees. We played as a team. We played from the regular tees. Then the next hole, we played from the senior tees, and the next hole from the ladies' tees. Since it's only being counted as low gross 2 net, sometimes one of the players who's really scored does not count, would sometimes pick up. Would you still post those scores?
A round where you played 3 different sets of tees, we're not going to post that. Yeah, we're not posting those scores.
I didn't think so.
Yeah, I mean, if it's something that you do often, we maybe be able to give you a temporary course slip rating to do so. But yeah, this is not an uncommon event. But yeah, typically we're not posting scores for those.
Okay.
Yeah, that's
Thank
okay.
you.
Yeah, it would probably come out. The rating would probably come out at the middle tee, but we're just not posting scores. But sounds like a fun event, though.
Oh, it was fun, but it shouldn't have been posted. It ended up getting posted, but
Yeah.
shouldn't have been posted.
All right, okay. I can look at it later, maybe. All right. Okay, let's move on. There's nothing else. I have plenty of time for more questions. Committee actions and some notes on the handicapping terminology is if you haven't noticed by now, there's lots of terms in our rules of handicapping. There's handicap index, score differential, course handicap, playing handicap, course and slope rating, stroke indexes, which pretty much get called handicap holes. Still, that's fine. It's important to use these terms properly, be consistent. If you're communicating with golfers by email or newsletters, make sure you capitalize these words and use the full phrases. We don't want to just say handicap because that doesn't really indicate what we're trying to talk about or what you may be trying to talk about. So yeah, use capital letters. All these things have trademarks and registrations, so you don't have to do that. But certainly use capital letters, and then to be consistent, and try to encourage your golfers to do the same. Rule 7.1, handicap committee. Conducting a handicap review and adjusting a handicap index. So a little bit of a touch on a little bit what Bill's going to have to deal with here. So the handicap committee has the responsibility of ensuring that players at a club have a handicap index that represents their demonstrated ability. So to fulfill that duty, the handicap committee has discretion to conduct a handicap review at any time. It's strongly recommended that they conduct a review at least annually for all players who have designated that club as their home club. And of course, a handicap review may be conducted at the request of another player at any time. And now we have that new review tool. That new review tool is not required to be run on your club this year. It's encouraged, but next year that will be a requirement to run that review tool at least once per year. Adjusting a handicap index. So in considering the available evidence, the handicap committee must decide the appropriate course of action for any adjustment to a player's handicap index, which can be either resetting the handicap index by applying an adjustment to each of the last 20 scores. That's one way to do this. So that adjustment kind of works itself off. Or you could choose to simply freeze the golfer's handicap index at a level selected by the handicap committee for a defined period, not to exceed a year. Whether to reply any adjustments, so this kind of talks about that handicap review tool a little bit here. So it's at the discretion of the handicap committee, and taking into consideration other knowledge of the handicap committee has other knowledge the committee has related to their ability. So once a handicap review is complete, the handicap committee can consider the appropriate handicap index adjustment for the player. Any adjustment to a player's handicap index, so there's some requirements if you do adjust the handicap index for a player. Be applied only after the player has been informed of the review process, which includes that the player must be notified when the handicap index adjustment becomes effective and the time frame and when how long they have to appeal. Adjustments need to be a minimum of 1 stroke up or down. And you really don't want to raise or lower the handicap index by more than 5.0 strokes, but there are exceptional circumstances for doing so. So I think we'll talk a little bit more about handicap review here in a little bit. Penalty scores. So in a situation where a player fails to post an acceptable score, the handicap committee can determine whether the player's reason for not posting the score is justified and take appropriate action. So maybe they were practicing on the course or playing by themselves. So the value of any penalty score applied to the player's scoring record should be appropriate for their intent. So if they didn't post a score and they were trying to intend to lower their handicap index by not posting if they were trying to do the odd one of trying to lower their handicap index by not posting a high score, you should post a penalty score that's equal to the highest score differential in the last 19 scores, or typically if they didn't post a low score because they wanted to raise their handicap index, they should get a penalty score equal to the lowest score differential in their last 20 scores or last 19. And there's a tool to be able to do this automatically in the GIN admin portal. But for players who repeatedly fail to submit acceptable scores, the handicap committee should consider withdrawal of their handicap index or other disciplinary action. So here's typically how penalty scores should work and how your committee should handle them. Kind of have a policy, a straightforward policy that you can point to. Says, here's what we do. So an example of a policy might be a first failure to post, you get a written warning. The second time, maybe you get a penalty score issued for the score not posted. And then 3 or more failure to post scores, further disciplinary action. Not being able to play in club events for 2 months, whatever you feel is appropriate. Handicap committee is not required to notify a player before posting a penalty score. You need to notify the player before a modification, but not a penalty score. With the extreme example of withdrawing a handicap index, the handicap committee or the AGA, us here at the CGA, should withdraw the handicap index of a player who deliberately or repeatedly fails to comply with the player's responsibilities under the rules of handicapping. I really almost like to say deliberately and repeatedly fails to comply. The withdrawal of a player's handicap index should be applied only after the player has been informed and has had an opportunity to respond to the handicap committee, and then the length of time that the handicap index will be withdrawn. Golfers still can post scores when their handicap index is withdrawn, and they still must post their scores to kind of get back in the good graces, if you will, of the handicap committee. The handicap committee determines when that handicap index is eligible for reinstatement. And when you do, there's options you can have for what handicap index to use. Reinstate the handicap index at the level the handicap committee feels is currently reflective. That's going to be with their scores up to date, probably the most likely one. But they could allocate a new handicap index or the last recorded handicap index. It'd be up to them. Not too many withdrawals happening out there. They do happen once in a while, but not very often. Committee in charge of a competition. The committee in charge of a competition may set entry and eligibility conditions within their terms of competition. For example, a committee can set a maximum handicap index limit for entry, set a maximum playing handicap, and they do reserve the right to adjust the playing handicap before or between rounds of a competition. So committees running a competition have full reign of what golfers' playing handicap should be. They can't make any adjustments to the handicap index, but they can adjust playing handicaps, set maximum handicap indexes, so forth. All right, handicap allowance, Appendix C. We discussed that a little bit here. The rules of Rules of Handicapping has a chart, has a chart with recommended handicap allowances based on events. Common one are your 4-ball match play, where the allowance is 90%. And there's all kinds of other options, recommendations here. Foursomes, these are alternate shot events, best 2 of 4, and so on. So scrambles. These are recommendations. You don't have to follow this exact number, but they are recommendations. Of note, though, you can pay attention to how the makeup and the number of players in your event when determining the handicap allowance. So field and makeup have an impact on equity and can be taken consideration when determining handicap allowances, especially for individual stroke play. So individual stroke play, the actual recommendation of a handicap allowance is 95%. Based on what they call a medium-sized field event, which is 30 through 100 players. That's a pretty broad range, but still. If you have a small field, less than 30 players, a handicap allowance of 100% could be considered. Likewise, if there's a significant percentage of high handicappers in the field, maybe a big field, a lot of high handicappers, you probably want to lower that percentage of the handicap allowance downward, probably go from 95 down to, say, a 90. So there's a little chart in the rules of handicapping as well. You got a small event, kind of lean upward on the allowance. A big event or higher handicap players, we're going to maybe lower that handicap allowance a little bit. Yeah, here's my plus handicappers slide. So When applying a handicap allowance, any reduction will always result in the playing handicap closer to 0, including those for players with a plus handicap index. So this chart kind of doesn't really reinforce it, but maybe a little bit. But yeah, we're moving closer to 0. And you can kind of see this is an example with the plus handicappers. With one plus handicap, like an A is a plus, B is a non-plus, and that range gets smaller. Kind of the same idea with 2 golfers here that are both not plus handicappers. That range gets smaller as well. All right, touched briefly on handicap review. We're going to dig into it a little bit more here. And so yeah, the handicap committee plays a vital role in successful administration of a player's handicap index. Make a note for myself here. All right. Again, it's strongly recommended that handicap committee conducts a review for eligible members on its rosters at least once a year. Pretty much going to be required next year. Using a consistent, objective approach, we always want to be objective, not be subjective with our evaluations. Working with a handicap committee right now, I think they got a little bit of subjectivity going on, but it's tough to tell. In 2024, that review tool was introduced, and that's helped us to use identify players that are consistently scoring above or below expectations, or where anomalies exist. So, what is a handicap review? It's a procedure carried out by the handicap committees to determine if the handicap index of any member who has designated that club as their home club needs to be adjusted. When do you do this? Handicap committee has the discretion to conduct a handicap review at any time. Again, strongly recommended to do the review at least annually. A handicap review may also be conducted at the request of the player or of the player themselves, or another player can request that. Typically, golfers that might be maybe manipulating their handicap index in order to gain advantage, or often golfers coming back from injury, illness, maybe a time away from the game as well. So what do you look at when you're doing a handicap review? You're going to want to look at any available evidence. So whether the player's scoring potential has been affected by injury, illness, disability, what have you. Any handicaps previously held by the player, whether they're rapidly improving or maybe rapidly declining. Keep that in mind. As I mentioned, yeah, whether the player's performance is different in one format of play, typically comparing competition rounds to casual rounds. Or if the player's actions are, gaining an unfair advantage. But specifically, here's a common scenario, and this is one of my questions I get a lot from handicap chairs and pros. Golfers coming back from injury or illness, what do we do to handle that golfer's handicap index? First, we want to look at how many scores have posted since the return from the injury or the surgery. Sometimes I get the question before the injured golfer has even, put a peg in the ground and teed off. We at least see the golfer play. We need a few scores to be able to evaluate what to do. So we can often a good step is to base a handicap index only on scores that have been posted since the injury. But we want to look at how long is the recovery going to be? Is the golfer is their game affected permanently going forward? Every case is a little bit different. We're always going to want any handicap index modification, whether it's in injury or illness or not. We kind of want to monitor and re-review at various intervals. But also a review could involve the analysis of any and all of the following information. Are the golfers' scores consistent or inconsistent? Same with their handicap history. Is that going up or down, or is it kind of flatlining, staying consistent? We want to look at timeliness of score posting. Are the scores batch posted? Are they posted chronologically? Maybe comparing the number of rounds in the last 12 months versus the previous 12-month cycles. Are they posting a lot fewer rounds? Are they posting a lot more rounds? Comparing score differential averages between competitions and casual rounds. And again, looking at number of away scores. Any exceptional score reductions, those jump right out at you when you're looking at the golfer's scores. Does the golfer's post hole by hole. I like golfers who have their score records posted hole by hole. It certainly gives you a clearer look at that golfer's ability. And then finally, looking at this new review tool. What's the result of that? Does it make a recommendation? And that review tool, and again, I'll have other seminars on that, where you can dig in and see it'll show the comparison with casual competition rounds. It'll show you those low scores or their high scores and when they occurred. But yeah, here's a scoring record that I looked at one point that shows, bad timeliness of score postings. Scores not posted on the day of play. Too many scores posted in the morning. I'll often see that a golfer will wake up in the morning and post a score for the previous day or 2 days before, and those just kind of, if they do that a lot, that's a bad habit. Either a bad habit or they're trying to do something. Scores posted in batches. Once in a while, if I'm looking at scores and I see that a golfer went on a road trip to Myrtle Beach or Scotland or something like that, they may post all their scores when they get back. They do that once a year. That's not a flag, but a golfer consistently posting scores in batches of 2 or 3, that's something to look at. And then the scores posted out of chronological order. That's just something that's going to raise a red flag for sure. But that handicap review tool, it uses, just kind of jumping into that, talking about that briefly. That review tool uses player equations. It uses that expected score that we talked about, and to compare scores. Basically, that review tool takes the golfer's handicap index and looks at all their scores over the past 365 days, uses that expected score to see if they have scores that are above expectations or below expectations. And it looks at the frequency of play. So here's the chart. I don't think this is in the rules of handicapping, but I can provide it for you. Shows you how many flag scores are needed for a player to be recommended for an upward adjustment. For example, they have 60 rounds over the past year. If they have 6 or more flagged rounds, that means higher than expected scores. It'll recommend an upward adjustment. The threshold for lower downward adjustments a little less. I think it's like about 7%. If 7% of scores that pop up in this review tool are on the low side, it's going to recommend a downward adjustment. Not to get too much into the weeds, but the way that review process works is that it checks flag scores against the current handicap index. Basically, if the adjustment gets applied, so the system's going to say, okay, for example, this golfer should be reduced by at least -1. It's kind of going to adjust that golfer's handicap index inside and run that whole process again and say, okay, this golfer should be down by 2. And then it's going to run through that process again. It's going to kind of keep doing it until it lands on a number that's a good modification. So once the recommendation is applied, so if you look at that review tool, you'll be able to have the ability to look deeper into that golfer, use your knowledge of the golfer, and then either apply or deny the recommendation to that golfer's handicap index. Once you do that, that adjustment will be immediately applied. The adjustment works by, similar to that exceptional score reduction. It's going to take that adjustment -1, -2. It's going to apply that to each of the last 20 score differentials in their scoring record, effectively reducing that golfer's handicap index by that value. And then that adjustment works itself off as they post scores. So yeah, kind of a quick overview of the tool. Come back in from any of my review tool seminars, one next week and then the one in May and one in June, for further details if you haven't already seen it. Or if you haven't run it, you can always run it. If you haven't run it yet, if you're new to the review tool, you can always go in there, run it, and see how it works. You don't have to apply any of the recommendations. In fact, you should deny them, but run it just to see how it works if you haven't done so. It doesn't do any harm at all. All right, some final topics here. We're moving along pretty good. Some final topics for handicap committees and the rules for handicapping, World Handicap System. Stroke index allocation, which are the handicap holes, those order of holes in which golfers get their strokes. So Appendix E, there's really not a lot about stroke index allocation in the rules of handicapping. There's really very little. But essentially, it's recommended that the stroke index allocation be applied over 18 holes, which they call split into 6, what they call triads, with each hole ranked on its playing difficulty relative to par. So we can provide you a report, that's the sentence here, of a difficulty factor that has been assigned to each hole derived from the course rating system. So the stroke index allocation used to look at comparing scores, compare scratch golfer scores against bogey golfer scores and see where the bogey golfer needed the most help. Now the recommendation looks at the whole difficulty of the hole in relation to the par, but then it uses this triad method to move things around. The idea being to spread out those stroke indexes equally, put the high ones in the middle, don't put the high ones at the beginning, or I'm sorry, the low ones like 1 or 2 or 3. Try not to put those at the end, or try not to put those in the beginning, and try not to run them together consecutively. But it's ultimately up to the discretion of the handicap committee. So yeah, apply the odd stroke indexes over the front 9 and the even stroke indexes over the back 9. Unless the back 9's much more difficult, you can flip that around. Spread those stroke index allocations out evenly. You want to be able to, you don't want to have the golfers not have the opportunity to be able to use their strokes. Again, the 1 or 2 should be in the middle, and then basically there's the triad. It'll put the 1 in the middle, the second in in one of the other triads. It spreads them all out, and then avoid low ones on consecutive holes. I always say I'll provide with the report with the recommendations, but then you all know your course. You can make some tweaks, and often that last hole is often a signature hole and a tough one, but still try to avoid putting it too low. As you will, but then just take that recommendation and move things around appropriately. Jumping back to a question, the new review tool is available on the GHIN admin website. Yeah, it is definitely available now on the admin portal. You can go there and run a review on an individual golfer or on your club. Yeah, I recommend it if you haven't seen it to go ahead and do that. Just a few more slides. Thanks for hanging in there. Establishing par. It's recommended that the par be established for each hole in accordance with the following lengths. So here's our guidelines for what par should be. And note that par is based on, a golf course is rated, pars are determined based on how a scratch golfer would do, not how a bogey golfer would do. But there are some exceptions. We do want to have pars be consistent for each tee. So it's not always going to be the case, but where appropriate, the standardization of par is recommended. So, example, we have all the hole lengths on this hole. This hole is a par 5. All the hole lengths lie within the recommended par 5 range for men, except for these forward gold and red tees. They're 410. They're outside of our range, which was 450 yards. So it's 40 yards shorter than the range of what should be a par 5. But for consistency, we can call that a par 5 for the gold and red tee. The golfers that are playing these tees, maybe seniors or juniors, they're probably playing it as a par 5 anyway. Especially if the hole was designed to be a par 5. So like this hole's got 2 pivot points. It was certainly designed to be a par 5. So it's kind of designed to be a par 5. All the other tees are par 5s. Go ahead and make that a par 5. It's just when we get to the really short, maybe junior tees that start here that we might call it a par 4. All right, golf course rating, slope rating. The course rating system. The course rating system is used worldwide under the World Handicap System. Yeah, prior to that, the RNA had their own system, but now everybody uses basically when they started that World Handicap System, they kind of took the highlights from each, from the RNA, I think Australia and things like that. So fortunately, they took everybody else took our course rating system, and we didn't have to re-rate our courses. So they've had to rate all their courses. But it's great if golfers go play in Scotland now, they're able to post their scores. The course rating system addresses the portability of handicaps by adjusting a player's handicap index according to the length and relative difficulty. Um, oops. Course rating is an indication of the difficulty of a golf course for the scratch player under normal course and weather conditions. So that's what a course rating is. A scratch player is a player with a 0.0 handicap index. And as my slide already showed you before, a bogey player is a player with a handicap index of 20.0 for men and 24.0 for women. And finally, that slope rating, it's an indication of the relative difficulty of a golf course between players who are not scratch players compared to players who are scratch players. So it's next slide, I'll show you a little example. Slopes, by the way, range from 55 to a high of 155. So you don't have this access to the bogey rating information on the app or anything like that, but it is available on that national course rating database, which is ncrdb.usga.org. Search for the national course rating database. So if you look up a golf course, it's going to show the course rating. Again, that's the score a scratch golfer is going to be expected to shoot. So a scratch golfer playing the blue tees is probably going to shoot somewhere between a 71, 70, or a 72. But a bogey player is going to shoot somewhere between 95 and 96. And then the slope rating is essentially kind of a comparison between these two values. You know, the bigger those values, the higher that slope's going to be. So the higher that bogey rating is going to be, the higher that slope's going to be. Yeah. All right, that is, I think I've covered about all I plan to cover today. I can send these slides out if you'd like. I've open for questions. You can unmute or hit the chat for questions. I'll sit here for a minute or two. I appreciate everybody taking the time to get either learning the handicap system new or for those who are familiar faces, getting any refreshers or maybe just reinforcing some concepts as well. Yeah, be able to. Yes.
Can I get a copy of the slides?
Yeah, I'll just send them to everybody.
Great.
Yeah, enough people want them. I'll send them through the Golf Genius software.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Yep. And then Bill, let me follow up with you offline on your vanity handicap issue. You're welcome. The Rules of Handicap Manual is 2024. Is there a plan to update the manual to include phase 3? So the Rules of Handicapping, that's not going to get updated till 2028. That's part of the World Handicap System. But the USGA is going to update the guidance for handicap committees based on this phase 3, as far as I know. They haven't been great about communicating those changes, but the guidance is all on the website. I wish it was in a PDF form. If I do get a PDF form, I'll be glad to share it. But yeah, there's nothing specifically in the Rules of Handicapping to include phase 3. But like I said, it would be out there in the guidance. But yeah, just rely on me at this point for phase 3 sort of questions. Greg asks, can you explain how a golfer gets an index of handicap? So any handicap index that's modified by the club's handicap committee, whether it's through that new review tool or through a manual adjustment that's done by the handicap committee, that throws an M onto that golfer's handicap index just to indicate that yes, it's modified by committee. And that stays there until that modification either falls off if the score differentials have been modified or the expiration date is reached. Thanks again. Thank you. You're welcome. Thank you all.
Jim, I had a question.
Yeah.
I think you answered it. You don't have a PDF version of the Rules of Handicapping?
I do. Who is this I'm speaking with?
This is Jerry Falk with Palmetto.
Yeah, I've got it's an older one. I will share I've got it like on a drive I can share with you. because I
Really
I use
appreciate that.
Yeah, I have it on my desktop and I use it all the time. I still go to the hard copy every once in a while. But I do have one that would be handy for you.
Okay.
And then Mark.
It's my email address is labeled as Gerald W. Falk at Gmail.
Yeah, I've got you on the Golf Genius list. Yeah.
Yep. All right. I have one other question.
Sure.
If we get a lot of folks coming down and playing at our course who are from the north, and their courses are closed for like 6 months of the year, and so they're playing, and if they don't change their home course, they don't have a way of posting scores because they can't post at a club that's closed. How do you recommend to handle that?
Well, even though their course is closed, they can post away scores. That shouldn't be a problem, I would think. They can't post to their. They wouldn't be able to. Yeah, they won't be able to post back to their. Like if they're from New York State, they wouldn't be able to post back to their New York State course in the winter. But even though their Gin account, they're logged in, they should still be able to post scores to Caroline's courses. I'm not sure what their snag might be.
Yeah, I don't either. They're telling me they can't post the scores, and so I took them at the word that Jen won't allow them to do that. But you're saying Jen should allow them to do that?
Yeah, for sure, of course, yeah. But any golfer who has a membership in New York, if they come to Pinehurst to come play golf for a weekend or the summer, or for the winter, they'll be able to post those scores to those Carolina courses. Maybe there's a chance maybe that club has maybe that club inactivated their membership.
They could have until they open back
that
up.
could be, yes. I'm just like some clubs may do that.
Okay.
Just to take care of the billing of the handicapping on their side. That might be what it is. Now that I think talk it through, that's probably what it is. In which case, you have to see if you can get them on your roster.
Yeah, just switch their home to us temporarily.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Great. Yeah.
Jim,
I have
did
a
you need my?
Somebody go.
This is Ed Whitman. I have a
Ed.
question from Star
Yes, sir, Ed.
High.
Yeah.
Has anybody had the occasion to offer members of their club the opportunity to withdraw from the handicapping system? We have several players who just don't want to handicap. They don't want to post scores. And I'd like to offer them however you phrase it, a dignified way of removing themselves from the system.
Yeah. So, yeah, a club is not, if you're a member of a club, you're not required, there's no requirement to have a handicap index. If they truly don't want one, I would just have them get inactivated off your roster. They wouldn't post scores or anything like that.
Yeah.
That's fine. We hope golfers like to have a handicap index, but I understand those that may not. But I would just inactivate them. I wouldn't withdraw their handicap and leave them active, but I would just inactivate them, inactivate their membership. Yep.
Okay. If they were inactivated, would they show up on the roster or
they're still in an admin would still be able to see them by looking at the inactive side, but they're not visible to the outside world at all. If you looked up there's no verification. They're not viewable anywhere else other than by a specific club admin.
I see.
And,
thank you.
Yeah, and their handicap changes to NH and that sort of thing. So
great.
Jim, I have one question. I'm part of the LPGA amateurs.
Sure.
And we don't actually have a home course. All of our members are all different home courses. Does that create a problem with the tool?
No, not at all.
Okay.
No, there's no issues there. Yep, that's fine. Perfect. I'm hoping USGA maybe home is still kind of important to have home courses, but it's really, it's a little weird. It almost something that could be reevaluated. But yeah, there's no concern with that at all.
Okay.
Jim, this is Bill Boyer.
Jim?
I got
Bill.
one, I guess, later on, do you want me to give you my phone number so you can call me, or?
Sure. Yeah, I'll follow up with an email first.
Okay. And then
we'll go from there.
second, on the 9-hole handicaps, I've noticed that when we play match plays against 9-holers, that their handicaps, even if they play good, say they shoot 5 or 6 shots under, their net scores 5 or 6 shots under par, their handicap index doesn't hardly ever change. And I think the formula explains that. I don't think that's fair. It seems like if they're shooting in rounds where they play match plays and stuff much lower than what they should be, it seems like it should lower their score or their handicap index just like it does for 18-holers.
Yeah, I think that's what they're starting to see on the USGA side, and I think they have that. I think they know that might be a concern. So other than that, there's not much to do other than an adjustment to the playing handicap if warranted in your event would be an option. Okay, 9-holers have to play. We have to reduce their handicap index or reduce their playing handicap by 10% or 20% or something like that. But yeah, I think the 9-hole score handling could work a little bit better than it does now. But it's where we are. It's where we're at.
Okay. Yeah. No, you answered. And actually, and I was, I guess, on our men's golf association, we noted, and that was one of the options that we threw out, was adjusting the 9-holers when they were playing 18-holers, reducing it. You're kind of confirming
yeah. Again, a golf committee in charge of a competition has the ability to set players' playing handicap index. I keep saying playing handicap index. Has the ability to determine and set a playing handicap for a golfer. If you're finding that 9-holers are winning a higher percentage, maybe that's something that you'd want to address. So again, up to you, but you have to not ruffle any feathers as well, because it is their handicap index that they have established.
Jim, Jerry
right.
Falk again.
Hey.
Are you planning on giving us a copy of the slides? Or can
Yes.
you send me a copy?
I'll try to get that out this afternoon. Just email everybody on the Golf Genius that had registered. Not a problem. I got to make a couple changes to it and get it converted, but we'll get it out to you.
All right. Awesome.
Yeah.